So today I'm upgrading an Acer Aspire AM5811-E1522 Desktop PC, and this is actually a pretty sweet little setup. And we'll check out the specs sticker on the side of the tower case. So this tower shipped with some pretty good specs. It has Windows 7 Home Premium 64-bit, an Intel Core i7 860 CPU, 8GB DDR3 RAM, 1TB storage drive, DVD Super Multi Drive, Blu-ray ROM, and ATI Radeon HD 4650 1GB video card that offers HDMI, DVI, and VGA options. And so the only thing I'm really going to upgrade on this is probably just installing a solid state drive and try to hook up 2 storage drives, because I believe there are 2 already in this desktop. And one thing I need to do first is blow out all the dust, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, so here's the inside of the tower. We have our 2 storage drives set up here that I want to have running right up beside the SSD. And apparently this fan, the CPU fan, isn't working, and the fan on the graphics card isn't working. And as I'm feeling it right now, it feels really chunky, as if something's broken, so I'm going to have to take that out and give it a look over. I'll try to zoom in and show the dust, and you can see it's kind of caked on. It doesn't look too bad on video, but it's kind of like a moist dust caused by smoking cigarettes by the computer. So I think I'll need to take this whole assembly apart and probably clean it by hand. But I'm going to go blow it out with my air compressor first and see how much of it I can get off. Alright, so we just got done blowing out some of the dust, and just for reference I used a X-Power air duster. It's very, very handy. You don't have to worry about using an air compressor. You can just plug that right into the outlet in the wall. As you can see, a lot of this dust just kind of stuck to the power supply, stuck to the CPU fan, stuck to the other intake fan. So it'll take a little bit more scrubbing to get some of that off. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time, but I'll definitely get rid of the bigger gunks. Especially on the CPU, and that'll probably affect performance for the positive. So the next thing to do is to fire this on and see what works and what doesn't work. Alright, so as we can see, it has booted Windows 10. Not too bad, and we can hear the bad fan sound, and all I did to test which fan that noise is coming from, just to stop it for a second, and it looks like it's this fan right here. So maybe the bearings are shot on that. Pretty easy to replace. Thankfully the CPU fan is running, not making any noise. So I think we just need to clean that out. Our graphics card fan, you can't really see here, but that is not spinning either. So we'll try to repair that, or we'll maybe try to set up one more fan on the inside here so we can provide some cooling. In the event that I can't get this fan to work and I don't have a replacement. So, so far so good. Alright, so I'm going to start by removing this piece off the CPU fan and seeing what we have to deal with as far as cleaning the cleaning the CPU fan itself, and also the area on the heatsink. Okay, as you can see, it's really caked up with dust, and I can see why maybe this fan, it's like it's really quite amazing how caked on this dust is. So I'm gonna take the whole heatsink out so I don't scrape a lot of this dust, because there's not a lot on the motherboard itself. So I'm going to just I'm gonna take this heatsink off and scrape all of this off, probably into the garbage can. So another time lapse. Alright, so just to give perspective, try to focus a little bit. Look at that. It's almost like frosting on a cake. It's kind of amazing. Okay, luckily the CPU looks just fine. So before we go to cleaning the heatsink and the CPU fan, we're just going to remove the fan from the case right here. Alright, so as you can see, this fan is no better than the CPU fan. The dust is caked on. I don't even know if I'm going to bother cleaning this one because it does sound like the bearings are going, so I might just see if I can replace it. Okay, I'm going to disconnect these from the motherboard just by tracing the wires and finding the plug on the board in case you're curious. And then I'm going to move these over to my bench and we'll get to cleaning them. Okay, so I'm just going to take these little plastic pieces I got from like a cell phone repair kit, and we're going to scrape off as much of this dust as we can. Okay, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit here. Okay, we're almost there. See, the CPU, luckily this grimy dust is like only so far down the heatsink. I think it's going to be fairly easy to clean. I think I might actually bring this to a sink. I think I'm going to bring it to a sink and clean it off. Alright, well, I'll take you over there and I'll show you what I'm doing. Alright, so I'm just going to blast this with some water, maybe use this toothbrush and this guitar pick piece here to try to clean in between the little slots. See if we can get this thing clean at all. Okay, so there's still, I think I got most of it off, and you can still see there's some dark spots on it, and that's essentially just like caked on. I'm not going to bother removing that stuff. It's almost like rust. I think that this will still provide enough airflow to work effectively, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. And yeah, so we'll go on from there. I'm going to let this air dry and we'll go clean that other fan, the CPU fan. Okay, so now I put on some gloves because I'm going to start cleaning the CPU fan with some isopropyl alcohol, and I don't want my hands getting too dried out. So we'll just have to start by scraping some of this dust into my garbage can here. I'm going to start by scraping some of this gunk off the fan itself. And this should help the fan move a little bit better. I noticed that it was pretty slow, so I'm going to time lapse this. That's about as far as I'm gonna go. Like, this fan is much cleaner now. Hopefully it spins a lot easier, and hopefully it works fine afterwards. I just removed a lot of dust. It was really severely caked up. So hopefully, I'm assuming that this person is going to continue smoking around the computer, so I'm not going to do any deeper of a clean. I think this is going to be good for now. So now, we'll just let this in the heatsink dry. Okay, I meant to say that I was going to let the CPU fan and heatsink dry for a little bit longer and move on to cleaning the inside of the tower case and the power supply. So I'm going to go ahead and start scraping off this gunk right here. Okay, so while we have the heatsink off, we're going to clean the old thermal paste off the CPU and the heatsink and reapply. And then we'll put the heatsink back onto the motherboard. So to do this, I have a microfiber cloth and some isopropyl alcohol. And this usually takes it off quite easily. Now we'll clean off the heatsink. I'm seeing now that the heatsink is still not completely dry from when I cleaned it in the sink, so we're going to let that dry for a little bit longer before reseating the heatsink and applying the thermal paste. So we'll just give that a second. While we're waiting for everything to dry, let's take a look at maybe some reasons why this CPU fan is not spinning. First, I think we have to remove the 4 screws of the heatsink on the back. So we'll start with that. So it could be that the reason why this fan wasn't spinning or being reluctant to spin is because we have more built up really hard dust. So I'm going to scrape all that off right now. Alright, so I've cleaned this probably about as much as I want to. Hopefully the fan works now. It looks like it spins pretty freely. Just to salvage this, I think I'm going to reapply a bit of thermal paste on the GPU. And we just need to clean that off first. But I think what I'm going to do is just keep the shield off entirely. Just because the dust is so built up inside of this thing, I'd really have to maybe soak it and scrape it before it really made a difference. Because when I put the shield on, the fan rubs directly against the side of the shield, and I don't think it's all that worth it to keep it on. We're just going to leave it off for the moment. And we'll get this heatsink back on after I reapply some thermal paste. Just a tiny little dot should do it. Okay. This heatsink shifted around just a little bit more than I wanted it to with the thermal paste on, but I think we're okay. Alright, so as I was doing some more cleaning, I noticed that the power supply fan really needs a good scrub, so I figure what I'm going to do is take the power supply out of this tower, open it up, and just clean the fan. And we'll just start right away. Alright, time to remove the power supply. Just shift the tower up like this. And then we'll have the power supply here to work on. Okay. So let's take a look at this. Let's make sure we're in a good position here. Alright. So we have 4 screws for the fan right here. We definitely need access to that, so well, let's just start by taking out these screws. There's a better view of it there. Alright. Well, let's get our garbage can nearby. Let's get to scraping. Let's look. Okay, just about done. I think I'll call that good for the fan. And I'm just gonna clean out some of the power supply now. As you can see, it's pretty dusty in there as well. There's some pretty big clumps. I'm gonna use some Q-tips and isopropyl alcohol. And then we'll let it dry off. Alright. Alright, now I'm ready to put this power supply back together and put it back into the tower case. It's about as clean as I think I'm going to get it, without completely taking it apart and doing a huge detail, but I don't think that's quite necessary at this moment. So now we're done that part. I think we will go ahead and start reinstalling some components on the motherboard. Alright, so we'll start by plugging the power supply back in. And now let's go back to putting some thermal paste on top of our CPU and replacing the heatsink. So I just have this TG7 thermal take paste that I bought from Best Buy. Let's see. Just need a little bit. Usually I'll put 3 thin strips. And that should do it. Okay. Let's get this guy back on. Now we'll get the CPU fan back on here. And now, I also have a replacement fan for the rear exhaust. And it looks like the cable is just long enough. So I'm just going to reposition the camera here. There we go. We'll get this fan, this rear fan installed. Alright, so now we're going to get this video card back in. Hopefully the fan works on it. Although I feel like it's probably been so long that the fan was just caked with grease, caked with cigarette smoke. It would be awesome if it did work, but not expecting too much. Just due to the circumstances. However, the video card should continue to work fine. Without the fan going, we'll just have to monitor for excess heat, that's all. Alright, let's get this screw back in. So we have our 128 gigabyte solid state drive. Let's get this out of the package. Now, when this came to me, one of the hard drives was just out here floating around, so let's get this thing installed properly. And also this other hard drive right here. I would actually really like to get both of them installed side by side. I'll just have to take a look at the tower case here and see how we go about fitting that in. I think I'm actually going to save myself some trouble, and I'm going to put the hard drive right in here and stick the solid state drive right over here. Just take a minute to do that. But first, I guess before we finish up with an install, I'm just going to verify that everything's working properly. So let's try installing the solid state drive first, and then booting with a Windows USB just to verify that everything's working correctly, and then I'll finish the install later. There we go. Get the hard drive plugged in. Leave that hanging out there for a second. One thing I'd also like to do is plug this Blu-ray player back in too. We'll test that out later on. Alright, so just to go over the setup before I boot to Windows, we have our solid state drive plugged in. We have our hard drive. I'm not too sure how large that one is. I don't want to take it out. We'll just check it out in a disk partition. We have a Blu-ray player plugged in, and we have our optical drive plugged in. So hopefully everything works alright, and the next thing you see is our Windows boot screen. Okay, so we're back, and luckily we're able to boot to BIOS, which is awesome. I'm just going to check that out in a moment, but I just wanted to go over some further successes. So we have all fans working correctly. We've got our CPU fan spinning nice and quiet, rear outtake fan, exhaust fan working great, and wouldn't you know it, we have our video card fan working correctly, and we also have our power supply fan working quite well. So that's definitely a success. So I'm just going to dig around in BIOS here a little bit, set up the boot order, make sure all the drives are recognized, and then we'll get to installing Windows 10 over again. Alright, so I apologize for the lines on the LCD screen. I don't want to take the time to fix that right now. I just wanted to demonstrate that we are on our way to successfully installing Windows 10, and this is one thing I like to do during Windows setup every time I install, just to make sure that all the drives are clean. So during this portion, I like to hit Shift plus F10 will bring up command prompt, and we want to type in access disk partitions. So we'll type in DISKPART, hit enter, and we will type in list disk. And so we have all these different options, and we want to look at cleaning disk 0 and disk 1. Disk 2 is the USB drive, so if you're ever doing this, just watch out that you don't delete that. So we want to type in select disk 0. That is our hard drive, 1 terabyte hard drive, and we'll type clean, enter. Now we will select drive 1, select disk 1, and that's the solid state drive, and we'll clean that. Perfect. Once we're all done, we'll type exit, exit again, and hit refresh. Alright, now we're ready to select our solid state drive and install Windows. Okay, we'll check back in once we get everything up and going. Alright, just to recap, we have Windows 10 installed and it's running really well. One thing I did notice is that, unfortunately, the Blu-ray drive, the Blu-ray player, and the optical drive don't work. And apparently that happened a long time ago, according to the client. So what I did was just unhook power and unhook the SATA cables, and then hooked up a third hard drive. So now there's 2 storage drives and 1 solid state drive installed. So in my opinion, even better before, because the client did have external CD DVD player, so he's okay on that front. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's a pretty decent system, and I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I was calling it cigarette smoke, all the dust inside, but it turns out that it is weed smoke, so marijuana smoke. Still just even stickier probably. So anyway, I think that about sums up this service. I'm pretty much done. This computer is good to go. The only thing I'm going to do is secure this SSD with the tie wrap and do some cable management, and then we'll call it a day. So I think I'll just we come this far, so I'll just quickly demonstrate what I'm going to do, and then we'll close the tower and consider this project 100% complete. Okay, so this is how I commonly install solid state drives because they're smaller, in desktop PCs at least. So I have a zip tie, and I'm just going to quickly unplug and reposition, and then I'll plug back in. So I'm actually gonna, maybe I'll get a slightly better angle here. Okay. So I'm just going to install the solid state drive down here in one of the hard drive bays. It helps to have a mini set of pliers or any kind of cutting tool to go in and cut the zip tie. In this case, these mini Kleins will do just fine. I don't think I'm going to worry too much about cable management. I'll maybe put one. Well, everything's held together in place pretty well. And like I said before, it doesn't really need to be too pretty. My only intent here is that all the cables stay in one place, and thanks to likely a manufacturer's zip tie here, it is. So, no problem. We're ready to put the panel back on and consider this job complete. Alright, cool. So, thus concludes the SSD upgrade and deep clean of an Acer Aspire AM5811-E1522 Desktop tower. So, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you learned something, and feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below, and I'll be sure to try to answer them. Alright, have a nice day.